The ocean was black as ink on October 24, 1944. In the narrow waters of the Surigao Strait between the Philippine islands of Leyte and Mindanao, Lieutenant Junior Grade Michael Kovar gripped the wheel of PT-137, his knuckles white against the polished wood. His patrol torpedo boat, barely 78 feet long, made of plywood and mahogany, shuddered beneath him as its 3 Packard engines growled in the darkness. The smell of gasoline and salt spray filled his nostrils, while nervous sweat trickled down his back despite the cool night breeze. Through binoculars, Kovar spotted what no small boat commander ever hopes to see: the massive silhouette of a Japanese light cruiser, the Abukuma, cutting through the water like a steel shark. The warship outweighed his wooden craft by more than 7,000 tons. Its guns could blast his vessel to splinters with a single, well-placed shot. Beside him, Radioman First Class Daniel Prescott whispered, "Sir, they haven't spotted us yet. We should report this and get the hell out." Kovar's gaze remained fixed on the enemy vessel. Standing orders were explicit: report and retreat. But something burned inside him, a reckless courage that commanders usually punish rather than reward. "No," he said finally. "We're going in. 1 pass, 1 torpedo." His crew exchanged glances in the darkness, but no one protested. The 39 PT boats stationed throughout Surigao Strait that night were supposedly just reconnaissance, advanced eyes for the mighty American battleship force waiting at the northern end. Yet here was Lieutenant Kovar, turning his fragile wooden craft toward a vessel that could obliterate them with casual ease. No one in the 21st Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron knew that one man's defiance that morning would rewrite battlefield history, or that the Japanese would never forget the night America's Mosquito Fleet stung them to death. Michael Joseph Kovar was born into humble beginnings in Galveston, Texas, on January 7, 1920. His father worked the docks loading cargo onto freighters. His mother took in laundry to supplement the family's income. The fourth of 6 children, young Michael grew up with salt water in his veins, skipping school to fish from the jetties and swim in the warm Gulf waters. By age 12, he was helping on fishing boats to earn extra money, learning the rhythms of the sea and developing the instinct for weather that would later save his life and the lives of his crew. High school brought both challenge and opportunity for Kovar. His mathematics teacher, Elias Harrington, recognized the boy's raw talent for calculations and spatial reasoning. "That Kovar boy has navigation in his blood," Harrington once told the principal. "Wastes his time in classrooms when he should be charting courses." Despite his academic abilities, Michael struggled with formal education, preferring the practical lessons learned on boats to the theoretical knowledge taught at school. In 1938, after graduating high school with unremarkable grades but exceptional mechanical aptitude, Kovar found himself at a crossroads. The Depression had hit the Galveston shipping industry hard, and fishing jobs were scarce. His father, whose back had been broken in a dockyard accident years earlier, could no longer support the family. After a summer of failed job searches, Michael made the decision that would change the trajectory of his life. He enlisted in the United States Navy. Boot camp at Great Lakes Naval Training Station revealed qualities in Kovar that civilian life had never tapped. His instructors noted his uncommon composure under pressure and natural leadership abilities. More importantly, his experience with small craft and engines made him a standout candidate for specialized training. When the Navy expanded its motor torpedo boat program in 1941, Kovar was among the first sailors selected for transfer. The PT boat service attracted a certain breed of sailor: independent, resourceful, slightly rebellious. Unlike the rigid hierarchy aboard battleships or destroyers, PT boats fostered a more casual atmosphere, where initiative was valued above blind obedience. Lieutenant Commander John Bulkley, one of the early PT boat commanders, established a tradition that would become the unit's unofficial motto. They asked for volunteers for a dangerous mission. I volunteered to lead it. Kovar fit perfectly into this culture. After completing motor torpedo boat training school in Rhode Island, he was assigned as a quartermaster to PT-64 in the Philippines. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, Kovar's unit found itself on the front lines of a desperate defense. During the chaotic retreat from the Philippines, Kovar distinguished himself by navigating his damaged vessel through enemy waters after the commander was killed by strafing aircraft. His actions earned him a field commission to ensign and transfer to his own boat by mid-1943. Fellow officers noted his unconventional tactics during training exercises. He consistently approached targets from unexpected angles and pressed attacks closer than regulations recommended. His superiors considered Kovar either brilliantly innovative or recklessly aggressive, depending on their temperament. Either way, his boat consistently scored more practice kills than any other in his squadron. By October 1944, Kovar had been promoted to lieutenant junior grade and given command of PT-137, with a hand-picked crew of 11 men who shared his aggressive approach to combat. His squadron commander, Lieutenant Commander William Tappan, once remarked, "Kovar doesn't just push envelopes, he sets them on fire and mails the ashes to Tokyo." What few people understood was that beneath Kovar's daring exterior lay a brilliant tactical mind. He had studied Japanese naval tactics extensively, noting their preference for night fighting and their reliance on practiced formations. He had also identified a critical weakness. Japanese warships tended to focus their searchlights and offensive fire on the most obvious threats, often missing secondary attackers approaching from oblique angles. The night before the Battle of Surigao Strait, as his crew performed maintenance on their torpedoes, Kovar shared a final letter from his younger brother, serving with the Marines on Peleliu. The brutal fighting had taken a terrible toll. "These boys need ships to bring them home," Kovar told his crew. "Every Japanese vessel we stop is one that can't kill our boys on the beaches." He had no idea that those instincts would be all that stood between life and annihilation in less than 24 hours. As American forces pushed westward across the Pacific in 1944, the liberation of the Philippines became a strategic imperative and a personal crusade for General Douglas MacArthur, who had famously promised, "I shall return." By October, massive American naval forces had assembled to support the invasion of Leyte Island. The Japanese response was the creation of a complex naval counterattack known as the Shogo Plan, a desperate gamble that committed virtually every operational warship in the Imperial Japanese Navy to a coordinated attack on the American invasion force. The plan divided Japanese naval power into three main groups: the Northern Force, Center Force, and Southern Force. While the Northern Force of carriers would serve as a decoy to draw away the American fast carrier groups, the powerful Center Force under Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita would approach through the San Bernardino Strait. Simultaneously, the Southern Force would push through the Surigao Strait in a pincer movement designed to catch the American invasion fleet in a deadly crossfire. The Southern Force itself was divided into two groups. The vanguard, commanded by Vice Admiral Shoji Nishimura, included the battleships Yamashiro and Fuso, the heavy cruiser Megami, and 4 destroyers. Following 20 miles behind was Vice Admiral Kiyohide Shima's 2nd Striking Force with the heavy cruisers Nachi and Ashigara, the light cruiser Abukuma, and 4 destroyers. These formations represented the desperate commitment of the Japanese Navy to victory at any cost. The crews had been told their mission was likely one way. They were to break through to the transport ships in Leyte Gulf and inflict maximum damage regardless of their own survival. Emperor Hirohito himself had approved this virtual suicide mission, understanding that without the Philippines, Japan's resource lifeline to the oil fields of the Dutch East Indies would be severed. On the American side, intelligence had detected the Japanese movements, allowing 7th Fleet Commander Admiral Thomas Kinkaid to prepare a response. The narrow confines of Surigao Strait presented an ideal defensive position. Rear Admiral Jesse Oldendorf arranged his forces in a classic trap formation, his battle line of 6 battleships, West Virginia, Maryland, Mississippi, Tennessee, California, and Pennsylvania, would form the bar of a T across the northern exit of the strait, allowing them to fire full broadsides against enemies who could only fire forward guns. In front of the battleships, Oldendorf positioned his cruisers and destroyers for torpedo attacks. But his first line of defense, and his eyes in the darkness, would be 39 PT boats stationed in 13 3-boat sections throughout the southern entrance of the strait. The PT boats were considered expendable. Their primary mission was to provide early warning and perhaps disrupt the Japanese formation before retreating. No one expected these small craft to inflict serious damage against capital ships. The wooden vessels displaced just 50 tons compared to the 35,000-ton Japanese battleships. Their armament consisted of 4 torpedoes, several machine guns, and sometimes a small cannon, insignificant against the massive firepower of enemy warships. The strategic situation made the night of October 24th one of the most consequential naval battles of World War II. American and Australian warships were poised to engage in the last battleship versus battleship conflict in history. The entire invasion of the Philippines, and perhaps the timetable for ending the Pacific War, hung in the balance. What no one anticipated was that the smallest vessels in the American arsenal would change the course of the battle before the capital ships fired a single shot. Darkness had fallen by 10 o'clock that evening as PT-131 first made radar contact with Nishimura's approaching force west of Bohol Island. The Japanese ships were maintaining radio silence, steaming at 16 knots in a column formation with battleships in the center. As the enemy force entered the southern mouth of Surigao Strait, 3 boat sections of PT boats executed their assigned roles of scouting and reporting. Lieutenant Robert Leeson's boats, PT-134, PT-130, and PT-152, maneuvered to attack positions shortly before midnight. Enemy fleet bearing 045, distance 5,000 yards, course 340, speed 15 knots, Leeson reported via radio. Then, contrary to orders that emphasized reconnaissance over engagement, Leeson ordered his section to attack. The moment the PT boats accelerated to attack speed, Japanese lookouts spotted them. A searchlight from destroyer Shigyur stabbed through the darkness, fixing PT-152 in its beam. Within seconds, 4.7-inch shells were bracketing the small craft, sending geysers of water skyward. Searchlight, bearing 030, radioed PT-152 skipper, Lieutenant Junior Grade Joseph Eden, taking fire, making smoke. As the boats zigzagged at 38 knots, Japanese gunners found their mark. A shell struck PT-152's bow, destroying the forward gun mount, killing gunner's mate Vernon Federolf, and setting the boat ablaze. Another round passed completely through PT-130 without exploding, but severed radio cables and hydraulic lines. Despite the ferocity of Japanese resistance, Leeson's boats managed to launch 5 torpedoes before withdrawing behind smoke screens. None hit their targets, but the attack pattern forced Nishimura's ships to take evasive action, disrupting their carefully planned approach. Over the next 2 hours, other PT boat sections attempted similar attacks with equally disappointing torpedo results. PT-493 was hit by 3 shells that killed 2 crewmen and wounded 5 others. The damaged boat managed to beach on Panayan Island before sinking. Radio traffic from these early engagements reached Lieutenant Kovar aboard PT-137 as his section patrolled near the western shore of Panayan Island. Official doctrine called for coordinated attacks by multiple boats, but Kovar had developed his own theories about torpedo tactics against capital ships. Japanese ships expect attacks from ahead or abeam, he had explained to his crew during training exercises. They position lookouts and guns accordingly, but their blind spot is low in the water from an oblique angle astern. This unconventional approach was precisely what Kovar planned to execute as the second wave of Japanese ships, Shima's force, approached his position around 3:15 in the morning. Rather than attacking with his section, Kovar ordered his boat to separate and approach independently while the others maintained position. As rain squalls passed through the strait, reducing visibility to near zero, Shima's force emerged from the darkness. Leading the formation was a destroyer assigned to screen the flagship cruiser Nachi. Kovar observed the enemy through night binoculars, noting their speed and bearing. "All ahead. Full," he ordered his engines. "Helmsman, bring us to course 070. Hike, PT-137 surged forward, its wake phosphorescent in the tropical water. Kovar had positioned his boat for an unconventional attack approach, neither directly ahead nor perpendicular to the Japanese column, but at an angle that would be difficult for enemy gunners to track. "Target bearing 015, range 2,000 yards, called the torpedo officer, Lieutenant Junior Grade Peter Marshall. Destroyer identified as probable Akabono class. "Not the destroyer," Kovar replied. "We're going for the cruiser behind it." Startled, Marshall swung his binoculars to the larger silhouette beyond the destroyer. "Sir, that's at least 2,500 yards. Extreme range for our fish." "Set depth at 12 feet, Kovar ordered, ignoring the objection. Standard doctrine called for setting torpedo depth at 6 to 8 feet for destroyer targets. By setting a deeper running depth, Kovar was deliberately aiming to miss the destroyer and hit the larger, deeper draft cruiser behind it. As PT-137 closed to launch position, the Japanese destroyer spotted them. A searchlight blazed, and the night erupted with the crash of naval guns. 5-inch shells splashed around the PT boat as Kovar ordered evasive maneuvers. "Hold course!" Kovar shouted above the engine noise. "Maintain attack angle." Torpedoman's mate Franklin Weber stood ready at the torpedo launch controls, his face illuminated by the reflected glare of Japanese searchlights. The boat pitched violently as shells exploded nearby, sending shrapnel pinging against the hull. Steady. Kovar called, his eyes fixed on the cruiser beyond the destroyer. "Fire one!" With a pneumatic hiss, the first Mark 8 torpedo slid from its tube into the black water. Immediately, PT-137 heeled into a hard turn, engines thundering as Kovar executed the evasive pattern he had practiced countless times. Japanese shells followed their wake, exploding where the boat had been seconds before. "Did you see it hit?" Prescott asked, straining to see through the smoke and darkness. "Negative," Kovar replied, focusing on navigating away from the deadly fire. "No way to tell." What Kovar couldn't see was that his unconventional tactic had worked perfectly. The torpedo had indeed run deeper than standard setting, passing harmlessly under the destroyer Akabono exactly as intended. But 20 seconds later, it struck the light cruiser Abukuma on her port side below the bridge structure. The explosion ripped a 15-foot gash in the cruiser's hull, killing 37 crewmen instantly and flooding the forward boiler room. Abukuma's speed dropped immediately from 20 knots to 10 as she began listing to port. Aboard the flagship Nachi, Vice Admiral Shima received the desperate damage report from Abukuma. The cruiser was temporarily dead in the water, taking on water, with fire spreading below decks. His carefully planned formation was now compromised, with his third most powerful vessel crippled by a single torpedo from what Japanese naval doctrine dismissed as a mere mosquito craft. Kovar had no way of knowing his torpedo had struck. Following standard procedure after an attack, PT-137 withdrew to rejoin its section, reporting the engagement but unable to confirm any hits. It would be days before American intelligence confirmed that his single torpedo had knocked Abukuma permanently out of the battle. As Nishimura's and Shima's forces continued to push northward through the strait, they encountered the destroyer squadrons and then the devastating gunfire of Oldendorf's battleships and cruisers. The Japanese forces were decimated, losing both battleships and 3 destroyers, while Mogami and the damaged Abukuma managed to escape southward. But the battle wasn't over for the PT boats. As dawn approached on October 25th, Lieutenant Junior Grade Harley Thronson, aboard PT 491, spotted a crippled Japanese warship limping southward near Panayon Island. Through binoculars, he identified it as the heavy cruiser Mogami, damaged during the night battle but still operational. Mogami displaced 12,000 tons and carried 10 8-inch guns, any one of which could obliterate Thronson's tiny craft. Despite the enormous disparity in firepower, Thronson made the same decision Kovar had hours earlier. He would attack. "Engine room, all ahead full, hey?" he ordered. "Torpedo officers to stations. We're going after that cruiser." Bulk dumped. As PT-491 closed to attack position, lookouts aboard Mogami spotted the approaching threat. The cruiser's remaining operational guns swiveled toward the PT boat, sending 8-inch shells screaming toward the wooden vessel. "They've seen us," radioed Thronson's executive officer, Lieutenant Junior Grade Terry Chambers. 8-inch shells falling close aboard. The cruiser's fire control was impaired from earlier battle damage, but the massive shells still crashed dangerously close to the PT boat, sending walls of water over its deck and drenching the crew. One shell exploded 50 yards off the port beam, the concussion lifting PT-491 partly out of the water. Despite the devastating firepower arrayed against them, Thronson maintained course. At 1,200 yards, point-blank range for torpedoes, he gave the order to fire. 2 Mark 8 torpedoes raced toward Mogami, their wakes clearly visible in the early morning light. Mogami's captain ordered an emergency turn to avoid the torpedoes, but the cruiser's damaged steering responded sluggishly. Both torpedoes appeared to be on target as PT-491 veered away, engines at maximum power, zigzagging to avoid the cruiser's continuing fire. Looking back through the smoke screen his boat was laying, Thronson saw no explosions. The torpedoes had apparently missed, running alongside Mogami's hull without detonating. But the attack had further disrupted the Japanese withdrawal, forcing the cruiser to expend precious fuel and making it more vulnerable to subsequent air attacks. Indeed, later that morning, aircraft from American escort carriers located the retreating Mogami. 17 TBF Avenger torpedo bombers attacked the cruiser, scoring 2 direct bomb hits that left it dead in the water. The destroyer Akebono later took off Mogami's crew and sank the crippled cruiser with a torpedo. Meanwhile, the damaged Abukuma, the cruiser hit by Kovar's torpedo, attempted to reach the safety of Dapitan Harbor in Mindanao. On the morning of October 26th, American B-24 Liberator bombers located the struggling vessel. Multiple bomb hits ignited fires that reached her torpedo storage area, causing catastrophic secondary explosions. Abukuma sank southwest of Negros Island with 250 of her crew. In the aftermath of the Battle of Surigao Strait, American naval intelligence analyzed the engagement in detail. While the overwhelming firepower of Oldendorf's battleships and cruisers had justifiably received credit for the decisive victory, attention gradually shifted to the critical role played by the PT boats. The official after-action report noted, while torpedo hits by PT boats were few relative to the number of torpedoes expended, their effect on enemy formations and subsequent battle dynamics was significant beyond numerical assessment. More specifically, Kovar's single torpedo hit on Abukuma represented the most consequential strike by any PT boat in the entire Philippine campaign. By crippling one of Shima's most important vessels at a critical juncture, PT-137 had materially affected the outcome of the battle. Vice Admiral Kincaid later commented, "The PT boats represented our first line of defense, but in the case of Lieutenant Kovar, they became our first line of offense as well." For their actions during the battle, both Cover and Thronson received the Navy Cross, the second highest decoration for valor. The citations recognized their extraordinary heroism in pressing attacks against vastly superior enemy forces. 5 other PT boat officers received Silver Stars, and numerous crew members were awarded Bronze Stars. The strategic implications of their actions extended far beyond the immediate battle. The elimination of the Southern force allowed Oldendorf to redirect his forces northward to counter Kurita's center force, which was threatening the vulnerable transport ships off Samar. This redeployment helped prevent what could have been a catastrophic loss of American lives and equipment. Perhaps most significantly, the successful actions of tiny wooden boats against steel warships challenged fundamental assumptions of naval warfare. Japanese naval doctrine had consistently underestimated the threat posed by PT boats, considering them nuisance craft rather than legitimate combatants against capital ships. After Surigao Strait, Imperial Navy reports specifically cited the unexpected effectiveness of American PT boats as a factor requiring tactical reassessment. One captured Japanese document stated, "The Americans have developed the motor torpedo boat from an auxiliary craft to a primary striking weapon capable of engaging major fleet units with disturbing success." For Michael Kovar, the acclaim that followed his successful attack brought mixed emotions. While proud of his crew's accomplishment, he remained haunted by the faces of the 2 men killed aboard PT-4 93 during the same engagement. In letters home, he emphasized the collective nature of the victory rather than his individual role. "Any success we had came from every man doing his duty," he wrote to his parents. "There were no heroes, just sailors doing what needed doing when it needed doing." After the war, Cover returned to Galveston, using his naval experience to establish a successful marine engine repair business. He rarely spoke about his wartime experiences, declining invitations to military reunions and avoiding publicity. When pressed by family members, he would only say, "I did what anyone would have done in my place." But naval historians knew better. Admiral Samuel Eliot Morrison, in his 15-volume History of United States Naval Operations in World War II, devoted specific attention to Kovar's unorthodox torpedo attack, noting that it represented the perfect integration of tactical innovation with physical courage. The actions of PT-137 and PT-491 during the Battle of Surigao Strait reinforced a lesson that military planners have repeatedly learned throughout history. Asymmetric forces, properly employed, can have impact far beyond their size or conventional firepower. David can indeed defeat Goliath, or at least wound him critically, when courage combines with innovation. In 1958, a naval training film featuring the Battle of Surigao Strait included an interview with a retired Japanese naval officer who had served aboard the cruiser Nachi during the engagement. Asked about the American PT boat attacks, Captain Takeo Nagumo replied through an interpreter, "We had been warned about these small boats, but considered them a minor threat. After that night, we viewed them with the respect one gives to a small but deadly venomous snake." The Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island, continues to study the PT boat actions at Surigao Strait as a case study in asymmetric warfare. Modern instructors emphasize Kovar's unconventional targeting approach and Thronson's persistence, despite overwhelming odds, as examples of tactical flexibility that remain relevant in contemporary naval operations. Michael Kovar passed away in 1987, never having sought recognition for his actions. His obituary in the Galveston Daily News mentioned his naval service, but omitted any reference to his pivotal role in the Battle of Surigao Strait. It was perhaps the final expression of the humility that characterized his entire life. Today at the PT Boat Museum in Fall River, Massachusetts, a scale model of PT-137 occupies a place of honor in the Surigao Strait exhibit. Beside it stands a simple placard that summarizes the legacy of Kovar, Thronson, and the other PT boat sailors who faced overwhelming odds on that October night in 1944. They were ordered to observe and report. They chose to attack and engage. History was forever changed by their decision. The Battle of Surigao Strait teaches us an enduring lesson about warfare and human courage. Technology and firepower matter enormously in combat, but they cannot substitute for the initiative and bravery of individuals willing to take calculated risks in pursuit of victory. When Michael Kovar turned his tiny wooden boat toward a Japanese cruiser rather than away from it, he made a choice that military doctrine would have condemned as foolhardy. When Harley Thronson pressed his attack against Mogami, despite incoming 8-inch shells, he displayed a courage that no training manual could instill. The ultimate destruction of both Abukuma and Mogami, cruisers struck first by PT boat torpedoes and later finished by air attacks, symbolized the changing nature of naval warfare in World War II. The day of the battleship was ending, giving way to an era where smaller, faster, more numerous platforms would dominate maritime combat. In this transition, the actions of American PT boats in Surigao Strait stand as a pivotal moment, the night when David proved that Goliath, for all his strength and armor, remained vulnerable to courage, innovation, and perfect timing. The next time you see a small wooden boat skimming across harbor waters, remember PT-137 and PT-491. Remember that within the most modest vessel might reside the potential to change the course of history, if commanded by men and women willing to risk everything when duty calls. Would you have made the same choice as Lieutenant Kovar? Would you have turned toward the enemy rather than away? Would you have defied conventional wisdom to attempt what others deemed impossible? History hinges on such moments of decision, when ordinary individuals choose the extraordinary path. The Battle of Surigao Strait reminds us that victory often belongs not to the strongest force, but to the one willing to act when action seems impossible. Share this story so others remember what courage really means.